ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to another edition of Infection Podcast. My name is Nick Craig. You can follow me on X at Nicholas M. Craig or check out our website. It's infectionpodcast.com. Cannot do this thing alone. Joining me, as always, Brian with an I Aldridge. What's going on, buddy?
Not too much, of course. You can find me at Voice Computer on X or at Brian Aldridge on Gab, Get a Truth Social, and whatever ones eventually pop up. So yes, do you have something?
Yeah, I do. I want to come.
Jump on.
I'm coming firing out of the gate here.
Right.
So I caught this. You and I kind of conversed offline, which we don't typically do, for better or for worse. So DEI, we know this term, we're familiar with this term. It has infected nearly every facet of our society, not just outside of video games. It's in every corporate handbook, many places. I don't know if your place of employment does, Brian. I know my previous, DEI trainings, you got to do all this stupid BS, online, all these, ridiculous quota scores and everything else. It really is, and I don't use this word lightly because I know it's a serious term, but it truly is. I believe it's a cancer. It's a toxic, cancerous thing that has infected every aspect of society. And I caught this interesting tweet from Grums, who has spent 20 plus years, maybe more, as a developer at Activision, at Blizzard at the time. Right? He was a WoW developer for 20 some odd years. He no longer works there. And
he used to be the team lead for World of Warcraft. He was a producer for Diablo 2, StarCraft, and Chrono Trigger. Oh wait, no, he was a producer. Sorry, team lead of World of Warcraft. Oh, and then he lists off producer, and then he lists off some games. So he was a team lead and a producer there
of Diablo 2 and StarCraft. I would argue three very successful.
And he puts Chrono Trigger as the best game. I don't know what that is.
I think that's an inside inside joke. Accurate to say this is somebody that knows a thing or two about the industry, knows a thing or two about video game development, knows how to make a successful game. All three of those games woefully successful. He, a couple years ago, kind of stepped back from that industry, and since then, he has grown to huge popularity on Twitter, now X, for maybe, I guess you maybe say, kind of whistleblowing a little bit, shining a light on all of the nonsense that goes on within these video game industry, these various video game companies across the industry. So I caught this post that he put out, and it was a screenshot from a newsletter that was sent internally. And I want to read through it because I think it's interesting, and then we'll talk about it. So here it is. This is an Activision internal email to employees dated August the 16th. He didn't publish this on X until the 24th, so just a couple of days ago. And this is how it reads. Again, internal newsletter to employees at Activision. Team, we have some new news to share. Going forward, we'll be changing the name of our group from DE&I, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, to Inclusive Growth, to represent the dynamic and strategic work our team is doing to bring inclusion and equality to our people. Candidate, game development, and creative processes.
Well, they said equity, not equality.
Excuse me.
Aren't
yes,
those
you're right.
Different things to them?
They are. I'm an idiot. Equality to people, candidates, game development, creative process across the business. This change to use inclusive growth also better reflects the dynamic and amazing audience that plays our games today and ensures that we are growing in the right ways with our community. This adjustment does not impact one of our core values of championing diversity, equity, and inclusion, DE&I. That work and values remain critical to our culture. This change simply better reflects our strategic people and business opportunities as we look forward to our future. Signed, Casey Morris, Head of Inclusive Growth at Activision. I do find it interesting. If you look up at the top, it doesn't say Activision Blizzard inclusive growth. It just says Activision. So I guess maybe they're still segmented in some ways.
I bet you they probably
This is well before the Microsoft merger. Activision and Blizzard have been the same company for quite some time, but I guess maybe they still got some different things going on there. So Brian, your gut reaction is, oh, success, we won. But as you read through the letter, they're just changing the name because DEI as a term is under fire right now because it's so toxic and so cancerous. I mean, is there anything more to this, or is this just simply a company trying to save a little bit of face but continue with the same nonsense?
Well, and I think they're trying to future-proof a little bit too, because if I think they see the writing on the wall. Personally, I think Trump's coming in next year. Unless something crazy happens, that's just my opinion. I think that they see that writing on the wall, and they probably know that he's going to do a lot of pushback against DEI and be using the term DEI. And if they have a DE&I department, it's hard for them to say, well, we're not doing DEI.
Sure.
We don't do that. I mean, you named it practically identical to what everybody calls it. And so, I think this we just focus on inclusive growth. That's what they'll say. We don't have a department but our strategy is, it's all framing in a way that they can say it without saying they're doing these things that if people really saw it, it's like sausage being made. You don't really want to see it being made, right?
Sure. You just want to eat it and enjoy it.
You just want to eat it. and I think that this is kind of them just making it so that next year they can have an excuse and say, well, we don't have a DEI department. I don't know. What do you mean DEI department? We don't have one of those. I just think that's that framing.
You're right. I think it's very much a kind of cover your own ass in regards to what's going on. This term has fallen under an incredible amount of scrutiny. I would even argue in the video game industry, it's been the least amount of scrutiny. It's been in corporate America. Was it Lowe's Home Improvement is under the gun right now? Harley Davidson last week or 2 weeks ago was getting a bunch of crap for it. They fired
Which is
their
frustrating
CEO.
because I quit going to Home Depot because they turned all woke, and so I only went to Lowe's.
Well,
and there's two places. It's Home Depot or Lowe's, and they're right next to each other where I'm at.
You're wrong. You need to visit your neighborhood Ace Hardware. These are locally owned businesses. Your stuff's going to be a little bit more expensive.
It is more expensive, I promise you that.
But I can tell you this. One nice thing about Ace Hardware is it is locally owned.
Is it?
I don't know that I don't know that Ace themselves actually owns any stores. They are, from what I understand, it's like a
franchise.
It's a fast food chain, essentially. It's a franchise system. So you go to that's why they call it your neighborhood Ace store. They don't have everything, and their stuff sometimes is stupidly expensive. So that kind of cuts out. The point being, we've seen in way bigger corporations and kind of more mainstream with a home improvement store or a Harley Davidson, a motorcycle brand, where this has come under so much pressure. It's not been as much in the video game industry, Brian, because if we're being truly honest and fair with this, I would argue the vast majority, 99% of those, or maybe 95% of those working in the video game industry are gung-ho on this stuff. And a vast majority of the people playing these games, or at least the vocal ones, are all for it too. So who's there to push back? You got you and me and a couple guys on Twitter and some other YouTubers and stuff that talk about this. But for the most part, they've done such a good job with their little echo chamber. The video game industry has kind of been insulated from this because who's going to write about it? Kotaku? IGN?
Yeah.
I mean, are these guys going to write an article about taking down DEI in any of these companies? Never going to happen. They're all in the same boat. No. They're all running the same ball down the field. They're on the same team.
Well, and now especially the AI is writing all the articles. Is anyone going to be a whistleblower? Is anyone going to stand up and say, "Hey, this might not be right. Maybe we should do some things differently." If AI is making everything, what you don't have to worry about is a rogue reporter waking up and kind of getting red-pilled and saying, hey, maybe I need to go look at this stuff. Or, why this isn't exactly fair. I guess that's one of the downsides of AI.
Sure.
Is you'll never get those people that kind of break that story or leak something. Because if anything really bad gets in there, they have a perfect excuse as well. Oh, that we missed that, when we were proofreading our AI text. We wouldn't, of course, ever put that in ourselves. I think that's kind of a downside of all of this. That's kind of a side thing, but anyways.
I was kind of going through Twitter and just saw this popped up. This is today or yesterday. Bandai Namco, very prominent Japanese game developer, a lot of arcade stuff. Mm-hmm. They've been very popular for quite some time. They apparently have put out a memo in which they are fully embracing DEI. And according to some source on Twitter, this is happening because they have learned of incentives and initiatives from Western partners. This is I think this is the internal memo.
These are those things that I've been telling you about. There's money in DEI. That's the only reason all this stuff is happening, is because they get government incentives. Want to know what I think they won't have as much of next year? Government incentives for DEI. And what do you think is going to instantly go away? Because so many of these companies are doing it because there's money in it, especially when the economy is as bad as it is right now. And then you've got a president who seems like he's trying to make the economy bad, and then he's like, "Oh, well, but we'll save your business, and if you do DEI, we'll offer you some sort of incentive or funding or whatever it is that you need to make it through 2024. To make it to whatever that magic 2025 is that we keep hearing about." I feel like it's all a big scam, really.
Oh,
I mean, we talked about over the last, we've talked about it over time. But this whole DEI thing is a moneymaker for corporations, and that's why most of them are in it. Of course, then you get embedded in there people that are just, it's a religion to those people. But the original foot in the door that ends up getting the people who, let that get into their company, those people usually end up all gone because they don't fit in the DEI model, but they sure wanted that government funding and didn't look far enough ahead to realize it was going to be their job. And now, companies are infested with people that are all in this mindset.
There's another element of this here that we've talked about in the past, but I'll bring it up again. DEI is a multi-billion dollar. It is a $10+ billion industry. So let's not kind of push aside the fact that the individuals that are pushing this, whether they believe it or not, I can presume many or most of them do. But you've got a $10 billion industry, Brian. There's money to be had. You might argue in some cases, like I think kind of what you're saying is the money's there. We'll play the game. If money is going to be there or incentives are going to be there, we're going to be a preferred vendor for all this, that, and the other because of these internal trainings or this initiative or whatever stupid nonsense. From a business standpoint, this is kind of where the libertarianism, which I don't like to be referred to as at all, kind of comes out, because as a business, if somebody's flaunting free money and all I've got to do is set my employees through some BS training once a year, from a business standpoint, it's hard to argue with, is it not? I mean, yes, I know morals and everything else, but at the end of the day, contrary to what the left wants to believe, businesses are about one thing and one thing only, and it's profit. Now, that doesn't mean they have to treat their employees like crap. That doesn't mean that they need to make bad products or screw people over. No. But when the rubber meets the road, profit is the goal. Profit is the objective, and without profit, you can't have anything else. You can't have employees. You can't have offices. You can't have anything else that you do as a company. So it's such a large industry. I find it hard that maybe this is not wanted, but is companies just trying to get a little sliver of the pie if they can. $10 billion is not a small sum of money.
That's why I'll be really interested to see how many DEI initiatives and announcements and things happen after the second half, in the second half of this coming year.
Well, but hold on. This is all predicated on
if they've got the government incentives. Yeah, exactly. If the government incentives are taken away, will this drastically change overnight? Because that's one thing Trump can do. Let's say Trump gets elected, he turns around and with executive orders starts to take away some of these things immediately, because he can make them go away immediately. At that point, will any of these companies, if there's no funding behind it, it'll be interesting to see how many companies actually announce that they're still doing these things.
I would agree with
and
that.
I would suspect that all that money would go away because they're going to do a ton to try to recover the budget and the spending's out of control. The money, this is what's causing all our inflation. So I think this will be one of the things that definitely goes.
Yeah, and so I guess you're kind of hearing it here first. Keep an eye out for companies that are, quote, scrapping DEI. Dig a little bit deeper into what the story is and what they're actually doing. I would venture that a vast majority of those companies are doing exactly what Activision is doing here, rebranding, relabeling, and they even said as much. Nothing is going to change. We're still committed to all the same principles. You're just putting lipstick on a pig at that point. And, for some people, maybe the headline's enough to say, hurrah, we won. But when you dig in even the slightest bit, again, they don't try to hide it. It's only a 3-paragraph statement email internally, and the third paragraph says exactly what it is. It's not like they're not masquerading it anywhere. It's right out there for you to see. For a little tip to everybody, keep an eye on that and kind of see how that tracks.
Yeah, I mentioned a little bit about people in the publishing industry online here today.
Sure.
I wanted to transition that to that Fallout article because I thought this was interesting because I've been told, and it seems like it's always been said in recent years, that Fallout is kind of anti-capitalism, saying that capitalism and all this leads to
Fallout,
nuclear war, right? And what's interesting here is the original Fallout co-creator Tim Kaine says critique of capitalism was never the point of the games, and if anything, they're about how war is inevitable given basic human nature. And because the left's trying to push and say, oh look, this game that they all love is pushing against capitalism. Actually, it's pushing against the people that always seem to push to go to war. They're always pushing to fight, always pushing to hate each other, which is exactly what they're on the side doing, and there's people on both sides doing that, of course. But I just thought it was kind of interesting that just because they thought it fit their narrative. This whole time, I've never heard anyone push an opposite perspective. Other, because this is what all the, our professional video game blobloggers had
journalists.
to say.
Give them the title, the journalists.
Yes, of course, journalists. Yes, those guys. I just thought it was interesting that this whole time, they pushed it forward. It was never pushed back against. But according to them, that's not what it was about. So I threw that in there. I just thought it would be interesting because I always assumed, maybe that was true. Maybe there was a little bit of a liberalism in the creators because that would be a total reasonable perspective to come from.
To read a little bit from it, critique of capitalism was never the point of Fallout. How can you tell? Because the game went out of its way to mention that other countries like China were also behaving terribly, which is very true, of course. In the original Fallouts that Kaine worked on as a lead, the U.S. was a horrifying dystopian, a chauvinist, capitalist hellscape that imposed its will on the world and shot anyone who disagreed. But it wasn't unique. Fallout China, which never dropped the smash the old world and forge the new world ideology of Mao's through the era, was also pretty violent. In fact, Kaine's original version, it was China who dropped the bomb first. He says, if anything, Fallout is a comment that war, as Brian mentioned, is inevitable given basic human nature. So I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a pretty big Fallout fan. I never really read into the whole capitalist thing in it. Maybe I missed the subtle, the subtle things that I was supposed to be picking up on.
Yeah, I think it would mostly be, if you're looking for that, it would just be some of the comments.
I never was.
Like the robots comments, they were being served. They had everything they need. Everything was perfect. They created a society where pretty much people could live forever.
Pretty much,
because they had machine. And robots would serve you, and everything was perfect, and then war changed it all. I mean, that's pretty much the premises of that whole thing. But they're taking because they were just wanting it, they put all these nuclear bombs in their cars, for nuclear power and all these things. I think I've always assumed that was kind of the gist of what they were going for, but human nature is people fight, people will disagree. What it really comes down to is humans disagree, and and people claim to want to be on the side of right versus wrong, and it's all about that perspective. But people will fight always because people always will have a different perspective on something.
Sure. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah. One thing I also want to mention, did you see about this Social Security? Well, it was a big, huge leak, a hack and a leak online. Yeah, it was
literally everybody.
Every Social Security number. And I went and looked at the thing I went and did a data search where it shows you kind of obfuscated versions of the results.
Sure.
And they had tons of information. I mean, it was just, multiple times over and over again, your Social Security number being listed.
But all that was
previous
but all
addresses.
Of that was encrypted.
I don't know. Maybe this site, I don't know. Is there a place where they have a partially unencrypted version?
I don't know.
I was supposed to look up mine and see generally what kind of stuff was in there.
I could be wrong, but if this is the one that happened a couple weeks ago, from what I understand, they got a whole bunch of data, but it was all encrypted data. I could be wrong about that. I didn't think the data was in plain text or some unencrypted format. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, I'm trying to see here if they say that. The data includes phone numbers, email addresses, that were, I'm not seeing where they say other than this data was in there, but I'm not seeing where they say if it wasn't readable.
Let's see. Let me find because I think Bleeping Computer originally supported it. Almost 2.7 billion records of personal information from people in the United States were leaked on a hacking forum exposing names and social security numbers, all known physical addresses, and possible aliases. The data comes from National Public Data, blah, blah, blah. Maybe it wasn't.
They're missing a lot of information, but what I gather is that they've been trying to sell the data, but they've leaked big chunks of it.
No, you're right. The file is 277 gigabytes and contains nearly 2.7 billion plain text records. Here's the question. Yeah. What was in plain text? Was it the name,
the
and
social
address
security
in plain
numbers? It's got addresses. It's got names.
That's
got
my
phone
question.
Numbers.
Is it just like the name and the mailing address that's in plain text, and everything else is encrypted in it? It doesn't seem.
No, it showed me.
Never mind. None of the data is encrypted. So no, you're 100%.
Yeah, right. It looked like it was just a list of all these, and I was surprised. It had like my girlfriend from high school's address with me on there for some reason with my social, probably from something, I don't know, registered something from there. I don't know.
Wow.
But it was just crazy. This is 20 something years old information, and it's in this file, and it's 100% accurate. I mean, it wasn't like a bunch of junk information. It was like, here's addresses that you've lived at or you've associated with people at. And for my dad, same thing. I mean, there's like 10 or so records of this type in there for each of us.
Interesting.
All with your social security numbers.
Yeah, I did not realize that was all in plain text. Well, that's a problem.
Well, okay. How's that going to work for people being able to register for things? Register, what are all the things you need a social security number for? Getting an identity and all this. I mean, you pretty much have.
The big thing is borrowing money.
I'm thinking of locking down my credit or freezing my credit again.
Yeah, I was looking into that as well a couple weeks ago.
Because this is going to be
a bad idea.
This is the reason that you would do that, is so that people can't take loans out on under your name.
Behalf. Yeah.
Right now they have your name, they have your address, and they have your social security number. I mean, really, how much else do they need? So keep an eye out for that.
Much it. Yeah, definitely.
All right. Do you care where we go from here?
No, what you got?
All right. Well, let's talk here really quickly about the FTC, because we've got a number of FTC stories.
This is a great story.
Gotta love this. All right. So the U.S. judge has struck down Biden's administration ban on worker non-compete agreements.
Right.
Which I know you were kind of wondering if that might be something that would work out for you. Which
it's not.
There was something else that was recently struck down as well. Oh yeah, the
Chevron
student loan
doctrine.
forgiveness.
That was today.
But yeah, so the FTC, like a lot of these things and things
Lena
that
Khan.
the administration is trying to do is like they're pushing these things forward and they're just getting struck down when it gets down to the courts.
Yeah, it is
because they're not legal.
Yeah, the non-compete thing is, without getting too much into the details on it, was something that I was hopeful the FTC would have the authority to do, but because the conservative Supreme Court revoked the Chevron doctrine, that did not allow the FTC to make that rule, and a conservative judge in Texas is the one that struck it down. So I was contemplating last week, Brian, whether I was changing my voter registration. I thought maybe I was, in fact, on the wrong side of history. I was actually truly in bed with the enemy the entire time. Here's the thing with non-competes. There are good... Here's the thing. I'll boil it down as simple as this. The government should not be telling a business what they can or as little as possible should be telling a business what they can and can't do. Now you have some level of that. If you're in the the food business, you have the FDA that's up your ass all the time about things. There's certain levels of things. But in this case, as much as it screws me literally, inherently I don't think that the government should be telling a business that you can't have an employee sign a document and we enforce it. That that rubs me the wrong way, even though
they'd be then overriding a contract law, pretty much. Right?
Yeah, well, but here's the thing:
you can't enter into a contract. This is a restricted thing. You can't enter a contract saying that you're not going to turn around and do this for somebody else.
Yeah. So here's the thing: there are good non-competes and there's bad non-competes. One of the examples that was given to me by a friend of mine that runs a small law firm was, she said, "Hey, we take a lot of kids right out of college. We're a small law firm. We can't pay them a whole hell of a lot. We're not some big law firm that's buying television ads and billboards and you're driving on the highway 888-111-111. We're a small law firm. So a lot of kids come straight out of college, work there. They invest a year or two into these individuals building up all their skills. It's an investment. It's not a monetary investment. Obviously, they're employees. They're getting paid. But there's a huge time investment into these young attorneys. And then after 2 years after getting trained at this company, they just leave and they go to take a job making 4 times the amount of money across the street. So I understand that. Now, there are also bad non-competes, which I can't confirm whether I'm in or not in one, that essentially restrict you from doing anything that is in the same business that you want to be within a certain geographical area, even regardless of why you left the company, whether you were terminated or if you were fired or at will left the job. So you've got good and bad non-competes. At the end of the day, it's not the place of the federal government to tell a business what they can or can't do with their employees. So as much as it pains me to say it, Brian, I'm glad that this was struck down in Texas, as much as it pains me to say it.
And if anything, what I would encourage the government to do is just put restrictions as far as limitations. Make sure that and it comes down to an employee isn't forced into these non-competes.
Well, but hold on. That's not necessarily
to a point,
true.
Though. To get hired, they have to sign the document, right?
Yes.
But they're not being forced to be hired. So it's kind of like, here is the terms of the agreement. You will come work for us, and you're willing to accept those things.
I hear what you're saying.
And what I would rather do is put limitations of, here's how far you can reach with those non-competes. You can't put in a 5-year non-compete. You can't put in, make it to where you put caps on the non-competes to keep them realistic. That I'd be down for.
Now,
rather than banning them altogether.
And now, one of the things that's interesting about this FTC rule is that it did not whole hog ban non-competes. If you were an executive, a CEO, somebody in high-level management, which in that case, you're talking about somebody with intimate knowledge, trade secrets, that whole thing, it kept those in place. And for that, I understand. The problem I have with the non-competes is you've got a bunch of grunt workers not making a whole hell of a lot of money, speaking from personal experience, and they are then not able to continue doing what they want in the field they want due to some of those restrictions. That to me is the issue. And that's not but again, you're right. I had a choice to sign it or not sign it. again, it's not much of a choice. You either want the job or you don't. It's not,
Yeah.
depending on the industry that you're in, there's either a lot of jobs or not a lot. In the industry that I was previously in, there's not a gazillion of those jobs available. So unfortunately, you're right. I had to sign the document. I didn't really have a whole hell of a lot. I didn't have any bargaining chips. I didn't have any leverage to try and push any weight around. I didn't have any of that. So, yeah, it's interesting. I'm glad that a judge blocked it at the end of the day, even though it
and like
some stuff.
The company I work for does it a little bit differently. They do it to where the company can't. They go into contracts with companies, that we're working for, and they put in their contract that those companies can't hire us directly from them. And so it's kind of like a non-compete, but it's in the reverse direction. So we're not prevented from the industry. We're just prevented from those particular people.
It stops them from harvesting employees, essentially.
You don't want them sniping employees off of your
headhunting
your company.
Every single person.
Because that's something like I had one of the clients that, if given the option, I'm sure they would have done that. And that's not fair to our company who's putting me in those positions. So that makes sense. But
Sure.
They did it in a way that it wasn't that type of non-compete. So it wouldn't follow me everywhere. I just have a small list of companies that I can't work for.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a time limitation on that.
Yeah, and it's limited. So that's something I definitely looked at when I took this job originally. Was I looked at that because I wanted to make sure it wasn't getting me in a situation where I'd be like, this is maybe I want to switch companies because it wasn't a good fit, whatever it was. Am I going to put myself in a situation where then I can't transition to another company to continue growing in this field?
Understood that.
Right. So, which is exactly where, so you understand that. And that was my biggest concern. So and my dad's an attorney. So, he asked me about the non-compete right away. He's like, what do you have? But that's one of those things, especially younger people newer to the industry, they're willing to sign things that maybe someone who's been in the industry for 20 years, 10 years would not do.
When it comes down to leverage
or get into that industry.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. So, and that's the thing is, like, again, do you have a choice to sign it? Yes, you're at will. Nobody's holding a gun to your head. If you're a new attorney getting into the law field and somebody's offering you a job with a great amount of experience that you can learn, you need to sign the document. Do you truly have a choice?
Yeah.
Technically, yes. Practicality, probably not. So,
and especially in a time when the economy, jobs aren't great. If there were tons of jobs, companies usually will be more.
And again,
maybe laws to throw crazy things in.
Maybe laws are bad because there are so many attorneys, there are so many laws. There's plenty of industries, and I'm sure even in the video game industry, there's huge amounts of non-competes on employees, so that you can't work at Activision.
Turn around and give tech. I know how to do this tech, or I know how to program this.
That's illegal. That's then there's the intellectual property side of it too, where if you're leaking trade secrets, that's not only that's illegal. I mean, like, you can be charged and thrown in prison for that. That's a real serious offense. But if you're working at Activision and then you want to go work at Blizzard, who is across the street, as they were two separate companies, I'm sure for many of those employees that's not allowed. But that's it's an amazing stat. I didn't think it was this high. The FTC claims that 1 in 5 people are in a non-compete, which I didn't think it was that prominent, but I guess it is.
Yeah, I think there are a lot.
And they do make some, and without sounding like I'm toting the Democrat line here, Brian, I mean, they do make some points about wages and things like that, because I mean, there is some issue with, if you have a non-compete that says you can't do this job in this area for 6 months, and you go into your boss and say, I want a $10,000 raise, what leverage do you have? What's he going to say? We'll go across town and get the 10,000 more? No, you can't, because you can't work. I mean, so like that there are some
that's the
things
limitations
there
that I'd be down
about.
for. That's where I'd have people in the industry, because treat it like they do, and maybe they do, but treat it like they do tech and the internet. The internet has people that go over and create all the standards and exactly what they need for the internet, and they write it all out. They vote on any change that happens. Do the same thing here in the industry. Figure out what is needed for a non-compete, and then put limitations so that figure out how businesses take advantage with non-competes, and just put some limitations to prevent that from happening.
Yeah.
Rather than doing this drastic, let's just kill non-competes, because that's just not realistic.
No, it's not. And I do
and they should have come up with
actually,
something that was realistic.
I do agree with Lena Khan, and I cannot even believe I'm saying this, Brian. I do agree with the Biden administration. The FTC claims that non-competes tamper wage growth, and
It does.
And I have to agree with that, because I think there is some level of that. Again, it's what a non-compete looks like in every industry is very different. I'm speaking just from my personal experience, and I believe it severely hampers that, because you have unless you're willing to move and relocate, then that's which, is part of the gig in the case of the industry that I'm in. But it's just, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
So.
Well, here's another one. So the FTC has finalized its rules clamping down on fake online reviews.
Oh, thank God. Well, they've lost everything else. Can can we get a W here, Brian? What's the deal? What do we got?
So the new rule prohibits the selling of fake and AI generated reviews and testimonials in several forms. The FTC cracks down on fabricated reviews and fake consumer and celebrity testimonials. Because one problem is with AI, they can generate semi-realistic sounding, I'm sure you'll have some one-offs that are not quite right, but you can generate millions of reviews in a minute if you really wanted to. And so,
sure.
I can understand where they're coming at from this. But so the FTC approved the new rules against the buying and selling of fake reviews and product testimonials with a 5-0 vote on Wednesday, and it's going to become effective in 60 days. So this was something that happened on the 14th, so 2 weeks ago. So we've got a month and whatever here to be able to get this.
At least it wasn't 180 days like the last rule that they tried to put into effect.
Yeah.
So thank God.
So there's pretty much going to be fiscal penalties. Fines could reach as much as $50,000 per violation. But this is something that will be interesting, because I think there's a lot of people who were kind of betting on that. With AI we can go through and really do SEO and
sure.
Well, that is a problem, because it's easy to fake it and make things look real.
Yeah.
We'll have more information on that. I've got another story that has more information from a PC gamer as well. So the FTC also, or do you have another one you want to go to? I was going to talk about the dark patterns.
This sure. Go to that.
This is kind of a similar thing. With the reviews, that's taking advantage of how people are purchasing, but also dark patterns are taking advantage. And we've talked about dark patterns in a number of different ways. But FTC is banning fake reviews. The FTC study finds dark patterns used by a majority of subscription apps and websites. And so, they've got them, along with two other international consumer protection networks, announced on Thursday that they, as a result of this study, they found that 642 websites and apps offering subscription services, they found that the majority, 76%, used at least one dark pattern, and nearly 67% used more than one dark pattern. So, well over half are using these, what they call dark patterns, which I understand, it's a marketing gimmick.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
It's the whole, I've only got one left. You better buy quick, because I'm going to go to this next house, and if they want it, your opportunity to get this is gone. It's that whole mindset. I don't like them. Once again, the libertarian in me doesn't like them getting involved down to this level to every little piece of business. But how much do you leave up to the consumer? Like, how the consumer has to have some wisdom to a point. How much do you want to regulate stupidity, I guess, is my worry. Because some of this comes down to people have got to realize they don't have to buy that thing. Marketers have always, this is the way it's always been, tried to figure out ways. And I think that super aggressive ways, I'm fine. I don't like the fact that they do it, but where do you put the line? How do you restrict it? How do you determine that they were aggressive?
Yeah.
I think there's, a lot of different, putting these rules in place doesn't immediately fix it. Like, how do you then fix it? How do you decide it was a dark pattern? How are you going to it was me putting a button on a website, and then not realizing that below that OK button that I put that then disappears, there's some other button, and am I going to get that fine for it, or is it going to be egregious? There's a lot of worry for me, because what if you're accidentally making dark patterns just because you're not realizing it?
Well, one of the examples of this, and I guess it would be classified as a dark pattern, would be, for example, Amazon Prime Day, where you go to Amazon Prime Day and it looks like the entire freaking website is on sale. There's a plugin I use, and you probably use something similar. It's called Keepa, Keepa, and it shows you the history of pricing on Amazon. I have seen multiple times over recent Prime Days, or anytime something's big sale on Amazon, the sale price that the product is more expensive than the normal price of the product, because it's always on sale at 20% off. So they put it on 15% off. You don't know that it's always on sale. And then you go, holy crap, this is a great deal. It's 40% off when it's normally 60% off. But they market it as a lightning deal or a flash this or something of whatever nature. And if you don't have like one of those, which is sad that you have to do this, but if you don't have one of those plugins, you really don't know if you're getting a good deal or not.
Well, in some of those like hard drive scanning utilities, or there's the whole bunch of them, but whatever those different utilities you can buy on the internet, and then they'll have these deals that pop up. Oh, if you order in the next like 2 hours, then you'll get 90% off, and you'll get all these extra products. And like, I think that's that whole kind of dark pattern that they're talking about. This fake sense of urgency, this fake sense of limitation. It happens it happens in a lot of different ways. I mean, what about when they sell limited copies of a game, digitally? Why? Unless it's an online game, that requires servers, sure. But, I've seen ones where they say, oh, we're only going to sell this many copies of, this game. We've only got this many copies of this game left. What are you talking about? It's digital.
It's digital, yeah. It's infinite.
Yeah,
literally.
I've seen them try to sit there and push that, and use as a marketing gimmick. It's like there's no way that you only got 300 copies of this game left to sell. It's not happening.
It's absurd. Some interesting stuff. If you want to read more about it, you can head on over to our website, infectionpodcast.com, and click on the show notes there. Brian, tough economic times, so it's time that we talk about Epic and Fortnite so that you can get your check.
Oh, yeah.
We have been following this saga for years, literally. And as of this week, as of just a couple of days ago, Fortnite is now officially back on iOS in the EU, not the UK, the EU, the European Union. The game is now available via the Epic Game Store, which is now available on the iPhone in the EU market if you have an iPhone in that area, and you can now download and install Fortnite directly through that. And now Fall Guys is available on mobile for the first time.
Well, this will be interesting to see if this carries over to the United States. If it happens in Europe and all these countries start doing it, I would assume that they're just going to transition and make it the standard way. But if Apple realizes they're making a lot more money right now by not incorporating it, they'll probably keep fighting it here and trying to prevent, there's supposedly things that are happening here, but be interested to see if they make it all the way to like this, having it at their own store and getting it all implemented.
Well, we know it's technically possible, right? Yeah. Because that's always a closed ecosystem. It's not possible, so on and so forth. We know it's now technically possible to do. And you do wonder if, unless Apple's forced by a court to do it, they won't do it. I mean, because, and for good reason, they make a huge amount of money off of in-app transactions, which you're required to do through the Apple Store. If you have an app on iOS and you're selling a service, a subscription, of this, that, or the other, you're required to use Apple as your payment gateway. And when you use Apple as your payment gateway, they take 30% off the top. It's a very lucrative business deal for them, and they want to protect that. So unless a court requires them to do so, like what happened in the EU, I don't see this trickling down to other places. There's no benefit for Apple. They don't care.
Yeah.
Why would they?
Well, and here
it's been off the App Store for 4 freaking years, and the game is still very successful. So Apple Apple doesn't care. People, I don't think
Yeah.
you've got droves of individuals dumping their iPhones in garbage cans to go buy Androids to play Fortnite. I don't think that's happening. Now, you might have an additional device you play Fortnite with. You might have an Amazon or some sort of Samsung tablet that you play Fortnite with because it's Android, and that's always been allowed. But I don't think you're dumping your iPhone, your Mac in the garbage can because I don't think that's the case. And if that's not happening, then why does Apple care?
Well, yeah, and so here's another thing that I saw interesting. So this Epic Mega Grant, there was an Epic Mega Grant that came out here. This was a couple weeks ago, and they did a Mega Grant for an online or a iOS store. Another one. This one isn't having to do with them, but they did a grant for this, and this store got put into place and allows you to pretty much sideload on iOS apps that Apple doesn't want on the iOS store. You know, like
that
some
they won't
of the
approve.
emulators, things like that they won't approve. Not illegal things, but that's the interesting thing is, why is it Apple's business? I understand why they're managing a store, so they care about what's on the store because that represents them. But why does Apple care? Like with this, why would they push back about somebody being able to install a emulator on their iPhone? Just like, why would Microsoft, if I look at it the same way, why should Microsoft care what I install on my computer? Other than if I break one of their licenses, why should they care what I install? They shouldn't have a say in what I install on my computer, right? iOS shouldn't have a say on what I install on my iPhone. I own that iPhone, right?
Well, you do, but Apple has made their bread and butter on being a closed ecosystem.
Yeah, and that's where this is kind of breaking that.
It's the same.
If they break that ecosystem, then it comes down to, why should Apple care? Apple has made it to where, you know, they should. We think they should care. You know, supposedly they've put up this false front that they should care, but like, why should they care? Honestly, and once that whole kind of hold they have on it breaks, like it is in Europe or the EU, then I think, you know, like here, then I look at this and say, why should they care that people are installing emulators on their phone, not through their marketplace that doesn't represent them whatsoever?
Because that's not the Apple way.
I know, but that's how I look at it.
It's plain
they
and
shouldn't
simple.
care. I look at it like I look at a computer. That iOS to me is the same as I look at it as like a Windows PC.
Yeah.
Microsoft shouldn't care about what I install on there. I should be able to install whatever. I can make whatever program I want to install on.
That's true.
Apple does not think like that at all.
They do not.
They don't even want. They want to control how I make an app to run it on their device. They want to control what I can install on that device.
Look at what's going on with iMessage right now. I mean, it's
fighting RCS. The standard.
It's a freaking disaster. They don't care. I mean, this like, I'm not a big Apple guy. I've got my iPhone, which I love. I've got my AirPods. I've got my Apple Watch, and I've got my AirTags, which are all in the ecosystem, and I'm very happy with. They are all about their ecosystem. That is their brand. Yes, 100%. And they've, to their credit, as much as people love to hate Apple, they have done it more successfully than probably any other company ever in regards to having the most restrictive, closed-off ecosystem that you can imagine.
I think it's starting to
and guess
come
what
back
happens?
To bite them, though.
It's
in
not
this
though.
Day and age, though.
It's not.
But I think that now that
they're the
other companies are starting
they're the most
to
successful
make
company in the
products.
world.
Well, I think it bounces back and forth now between another one recently.
But you understand my point.
But still, yeah, they're the top two companies in the world.
Why would they care? That's my point, Brian, is they're the most successful. Let's just say for right now, they are the most successful, most valued, profitable. Well, profitable is probably not accurate. They're the biggest, most successful company in the world. Why do they care that you can't install your emulator? Because guess what you're still doing, Brian? You're still buying an iPhone.
Yeah.
You're not leaving. So until you leave, which most people that are built into the Apple ecosystem are not. I will never have another phone that's not. I will never not have an iPhone. Unless everybody leaves, Why would Apple change their way? There's no incentive.
Yeah.
They've got everybody by the balls. They get 30 cents on every dollar of every transaction of every app on the App Store. Why would they give that up? It's hundreds of billions of dollars a year.
This will be interesting to see if this becomes an issue, in this coming administration.
They're already aren't they going through?
Well, I mean, it's already on the table, but as far as
it's another FTC deal that they're going to lose because the FTC sucks and Lena Khan's terrible.
It's still going back and forth. I just wonder if it will get pushed forward in a way, because I think they can get judges to agree with. I think the government can get judges to agree with them against Apple and say that they have a monopoly.
And there's good reason because they do.
They do have a monopoly, and Google just got nailed for a monopoly.
Yeah, they do.
Who's the other person, who's right next to them is Apple. Apple wants to be the same monopoly that Google has been in their areas. They wanted search, they wanted maps, they want all the same things. So, I think that they will get nailed as a monopoly here soon, and I think it's going to come in this coming administration. I think they're going, with Google, it'll be interesting to see how that works, because I think this coming administration is going to be all for nailing Google when it comes to search results and manipulation of search results, and how when you would search for Donald Trump, it would forward to Kamala Harris. and when you'd search for the assassination, what assassination, attempted assassination of Trump, so I think that they're going to go for that first, but I think that we're seeing the problem with these monopolies, if you want to call them monopolies.
They are.
Then trying to manipulate politics. That's where I see the problem. Look at these companies who are trying to manipulate politics in such a heavy way. That's where my monopoly issue happens.
So you've got Apple at $3.5 trillion market cap. That makes them the most valuable company.
I think NVIDIA and Apple have been going back and forth recently because of AI.
Yeah, and this is as of August 26th. So
this
2 days
2 days ago.
So you've got NVIDIA and Microsoft tied neck and neck at $3.1 trillion. Alphabet, which is Google, at $2.1 trillion. Amazon at $1.8 trillion. Meta, aka Facebook, at $1.3 trillion. I mean, look at these guys.
Yeah.
They own everything.
Yep. The Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, which is Google, Meta, Facebook, and then you've got Microsoft, which owns
the desktop operating system marketplace by a share that is not even. Didn't we look at this a couple of weeks? Oh no, that was Chrome, where it was a straight line and nobody else was even. I mean, Apple or Microsoft owns that. I mean, so this. But again, all of this to say, I'm not in love with Apple. I've never owned I do have a Mac behind me. You can see it in my wide shot. This is a 20. I think that's a 2014, 2011, 2012 iMac that was given to me by our friend Amnon, who's listening. It does not run any recent version of OS X. It just kind of looks cool.
I put Linux on mine. I had one almost identical to that. I don't remember what I did with that. If I gave it away.
So what I'm saying is I've never owned a MacBook. I don't have any reason to own one. I probably won't. But I love my iPhone. I'm not an Apple apologist. They have no reason to change their ways, because Brian, they have got me full send, 100%. I will not switch from their ecosystem. I will not.
Yeah,
they can do whatever they want, and I won't leave. And I mean, it would have to get to such a point that you would leave, but they're not going to push it that far.
Yeah, and being that there's only two, it's not like there's five where then four can group together and say, let's come up with a standard.
Who's the open source phone people? Wait, well, hold on a second. Hold on.
The $600 open source phone, or whatever.
The thing that's the size of a freaking Palm Pre. And the thing is huge. Yeah. The Librem 5. Their website's down. Oh, that's terrible. I'm getting DNS.
They must have been running it on their Linux phone.
The Libra Phone 5, Brian. You're telling me that this doesn't have the sex appeal that you're looking for in a smartphone?
You mean the one running on 3G?
Yeah, I mean, look at that. That's sleek.
I think it's thick. It's like it's a hard drive,
dude. That
or a
thing
battery
is
pack.
It's thicker than a portable SSD.
I know. It's like the older battery pack or portable hard drives. The ones that were extra thick.
I mean, so this isn't there is an alternative, Brian. But see, this is my point, and I'm not
over twice as thick.
I love you, Brian, and what I'm about to say is going to be mean, but I'm going to say it anyway. The alternative exists, Brian. You don't want to use it because it sucks. And that's the reality. Like, there is alternatives, but they all suck. And nobody wants to use a crappy version of something they have that they like. Why would you use an inferior version of something that's more expensive and gives you less? That's the issue with all of this stuff. That's why Apple and Microsoft have everybody by the balls, because there's no alternative. You can go run Ubuntu. Yeah. Yes, it's a fine desktop operating system. It's not Windows. And it will never be Windows. I don't care how big of a Linux enthusiast you are. I have 3 Linux machines running here at home. It's not Windows. And it will never be Windows. I'm sorry. And it's the same thing in the phone market.
Well, and I think, and those things are changing over time. And more recently, you've got more universal apps that will work between the systems. That is kind of slowly changing.
Sorry. I got to show you this one last photo. Look at this thing. Look at the
oh yeah,
it's the headphone jack. Look at how this thing looks like the phones that they give like who makes the phones for the military that are just like you could drop this thing off at a helicopter at 40,000 feet and it will. Motorola. This looks like a Motorola phone that just will survive anything. This thing looks awful. You're an idiot if you buy this thing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but you got those guys that are so gung ho.
And here's the thing. I'm glad it exists, but don't gaslight me into and you're not, but I'm saying don't gaslight me into believing that this is a serious alternative. HP tried that with the Palm, the Palm Pre.
Yeah.
They tried competing with early iOS and early Android. They convinced everybody this Windows Phone. Tried convincing everybody this was going to be the thing. There were no apps for it. No support. If you bought the phone, you were a sucker because that never came to fruition. You got left with a paperweight.
Well, and here's really where I think my concern is that they're going to come at it and try to drastically change the industry and how apps work. The government, because I think the only way that they can come in and really fix this whole industry, whether it's let's take just cell phones. We'll take cell phones in the app stores. The only way that they're really going to be able
to... What do you mean by fix?
To allow so that competition can come into the market in some form or another. Okay. Because that's the problem right now. If they can come up with a universal app logic, then a person who makes apps can make it once and it will interface between more than just an Android.
Use Unreal.
Right? Well, but so making more of a modular, universal, kind of like what they've done with some of the apps, but make it to where the whole store starts to transition to that. Or that at least the phone has to support it. And that the store has to support making an app like that. So that then the other stores can come and use the same app and put it onto their version of, it doesn't have to be Android. It could be Android, could be this Linux OS that we know is magical, Windows Phone, whatever it is. But if they could standardize the apps and how they work in connection to the operating system, I think that then other people could come into the industry. But right now, as you said, with the Windows Phone, everybody who made all these apps had to turn around and make a whole nother set of apps. You can't have 10 different variations of phones that are all disconnected, because then you have to have 10 different apps that each company is making. And if you could standardize that, that would solve that problem. Because that's the thing that really, I think, holds them back. There's no incentive for the companies to do this. That's why I think the government would step in and have to make it happen.
But see, that's the problem. If the government stepped in and did that, it would be a disaster.
Yeah,
because the government.
And so that's why I'm not all for it. But that's the only path forward I see that would ever make a change. Because they can tell the company to do it, but what's their incentive to make anything that works well?
There's not. And
the better they make it work, the more it's going to hurt them in the end, right? You're going to tell them to make their own noose.
But the point is, if there was a user base, if there was money to be made, if there was anything, companies would make it. And see, that's where.
But right now they're so locked into this ecosystem. You can't. How are you going to make a phone that's not Android or iOS? more than two stores.
These guys did it, but
the problem is
that
they control these one places control all of the apps.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
It's kind of like the podcast, Apple controlling the whole podcast back in the early days, especially all the podcasts. If you got kicked off of Apple, you were no longer in a podcatcher.
Yeah.
You were done. That's the kind of stuff that I'm trying to prevent.
I'm not. Well, I am arguing with you. You said, why can't they make this? Here again, I'll pull up the picture. They have made it. This is the alternative. And the problem is, Brian, nobody wants this. That's the inherent issue. We say we want it. We say we want a third-party option, but none of us are willing to do it because it would be an awful experience.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is government can't fix that. I mean,
well, okay, but they do when they say, here's the standards we want you to use when communicating back and forth with, say, a cell phone tower. They create standards. They go through and do that.
Sure,
I think
that's
they
a
could
technical
do something
proprietary standard. But
that's what I'm saying.
That
create technical standards
for
the app creation and connection with the operating system.
I agree with you. That still doesn't solve this problem, which is a underpowered, chunky, garbage piece of hardware. So you're talking about from the software side, which I understand, but it's still this is the alternative.
But if you open
guess
that
what,
up,
Brian,
you want to
know something crazy? It's really, really, really expensive to make a phone. Yeah. It's exorbitantly expensive to make a thin, nice, sleek-looking phone. That's what Apple does. That's what Samsung does. You use OnePlus. I'll say they're relatively new to the market. They haven't existed forever. Right? These companies have done it. There are success stories. Now, yes, OnePlus runs Android.
OnePlus would totally go with their own operating system if there was a marketplace for the same apps. Because they created their own build, for OnePlus and have done all that stuff on their own. They tried to create their own branch of Android. They would totally do that. And so if you gave them a way to have access to all of the apps that the App Store contains easily, then I'm sure they would do it. Get away from the Google. Get away from the Play Store. Because why should they have to have the Play Store?
You don't have
right now.
To. You can run it. You can use the Amazon App Store.
But I can't uninstall the Play Store.
You can if you plug it in and run.
Oh, I mean, if I really hacked away at it, I could. But then I break it, and I would, I break the whole core of the system.
Yeah, you would, because it turns out that for everything that's on the phone, the Google Play Store services are required for everything: calendar syncing, contacts, everything.
Yeah, and so I'm saying, like, they need to separate it. And then, their way of getting apps onto your phone is through the Google Play Store. It shouldn't be so core. The App Store shouldn't be so core to the operating system. It's kind of like the old argument with the browsers. It shouldn't be so core that you can't remove it. And that's what they made Google do. Microsoft do, is they made them be able to uninstall Internet Explorer, which was a whole new thing.
Yeah, you're right.
Bring it to that level. Make it to where it is a piece that could be removed if needed, so I could install my own App Store and not have any of your junk in there. Give me that option, and it seems like it's almost impossible to do because it breaks so much of the core operating system of the phone.
This is what Brian wants. True. I mean, he talks. This is what Brian is truly looking for. This is the solution. This is an open source rotary phone that somebody is making.
Yeah,
no apps.
We could do that.
A good conversation as always, Brian. If you were listening and you got any thoughts on our back and forth here on iOS, Android, open, not open app store, leave us a comment on our YouTube channel or Rumble, or shoot us a message in our Discord server. Brian, where can folks find you on the ye old internets?
If you want to find me, you can find me at Boise Computer on X or at Brian Knowledge on GabGetter, Truth Social, and other places. Of course, you can go check out my blog, biteoftech.com. Or if you go to our website, infectionpodcast.com, just go to the upper right-hand side and click Join Us on Discord. And if you do that, there's 11 ARC servers that we have running. We've got a lot of different things going there. We did have I don't know if you wanted to mention here really quickly, we did have one of our players on ARC here pass away. He's been a member of it since like 2016. You said
Sweet Daddy B. Yeah,
and he was right around my age too. I think he was right at my age, which is just sad. So he had kids and everything else. So prayers for his families. Also, if you want to watch on Twitch or YouTube, you can do that live, and we upload after the fact to Rumble. On the podcast forums we have at the lower right-hand side there, we upload those once the show is all done. So if you are going to be picking whatever platform is most convenient, we'll then have show notes uploaded by that time. So if you go into the show notes, we got a video and audio player built into that page, and links for everything that we discussed through that live show. So that way you have the ability to. Oh yeah, it's perfect. That way you have the ability to follow along, and maybe if there's a video or images you want to see and you were listening, that makes it easier. If you do want to support us, you can go to the support menu option up top, or go to infectionpodcast.com/support.
Brian, my friend, thank you very much. Greatly appreciated. We will do it again. Folks, if you want to check me out and follow all my fun escapades, you can follow me on X at Nicholas M. Craig, or head on over to my website, nickcraig.com. You can put your email in there. I've got some exciting stuff on the horizon, so hopefully you'll go ahead and do that. As Brian mentioned, if you missed any portion of today's show, maybe you want to read that full Activision letter, you can head on over to our website. It's infectionpodcast.com. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.